Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again to Management Consulting Journal. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the second part of the DRESS framework. So in the first section, we use the structure to define the problem. And now we want to create a new structure to help us solve the problem that we defined in the first stage, which is why this stage is called restructure the problem. And the output of the stage is the issue tree. So there are two components to the issue tree. One is that it contains a lot of hypotheses. So we're going to go over how to create hypotheses. And the second section is that the hypothesis must be MECE, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which means that it should contain all the hypotheses and none of the hypotheses should overlap. We're going to go into this in more detail right now. But before we get started, I just want you guys to write down what do you think a hypothesis actually is. So feel free to pause this video and write down your definition for what is a hypothesis. Okay, so hopefully you have written down a definition. So mine is that a hypothesis is a clear statement that can be proved or disproved by data. So the last part is very important, that the hypothesis must be, you must be able to prove the hypothesis or disprove it with data. Now, I want you just to remember an acronym for the components of good hypothesis, and that is REST, R-E-S-T. And so the R part stands for relevant. So which just means that if the hypothesis is true, it must explain the root cause of the problem. Because if it's irrelevant, then well, you shouldn't have the hypothesis in the first place. Exhaustive. So your entire list of the hypotheses must address all of the problem and completely answer the question or the problem of the case. Specific, so it must provide enough direction and value to the client, and it's not just quote-unquote universal truth. And testable, so we already went through this, it must be able to prove or disprove it with data. So use the REST test whenever you have a hypothesis to see if it's a good hypothesis or not. So we already touched on this a little earlier. We're just going to touch on it in a little bit more detail, which is MECE, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So the issue tree, which contains all your hypotheses, must be MECE, which means there are no overlapping issues or hypotheses, and all the issues and possibilities are covered. So we're just now going to jump into the exercise where we're going to generate some hypotheses. So from the earlier section, you might remember our lovely client, the educational provider that has been experiencing a decline in profitability, and their goal is to restore the profitability to last year's level of $120,000. And once we did the profitability tree, we narrowed down that the real problem of the case is that they're experiencing a decline in the number of students from 1,000 down to 833. So our question really becomes, why is this occurring, before we can come up with solutions to help us solve it. So I just want you to spend the next 15 minutes, pause this video, write down all the hypotheses that you have for the educational provider and why they have been experiencing a decline in the number of students. So feel free to pause the video now, and we'll reconvene in a bit. Okay, so hopefully you have come up with your own list of hypotheses. So here are some of mine. I just want to point out that this list is not exhaustive, so this is not the entire list of hypotheses. I just wrote down a couple just so that you get an idea of what a good hypothesis is that follows the REST test. Okay, so the first one is, due to the entry of low-cost competitors, our clients started to experience declines in profitability. So if you apply the REST test to this, is this relevant? Yes, because if it's true, it does explain why the client is experiencing declines in the number of students that they have, and hence profitability. And is it specific? Yes, it's not some universal truth. And yes, it's testable, because if we just ask for data on our competitors, we'll know if this hypothesis is true or not. I just want to point out that the E in the REST test applies to all of the hypotheses in general, not any specific hypothesis. So in this case, it doesn't apply. Due to the downturn in economy, our client experienced profitability decline. So again, if we apply the REST test, this is relevant, it is specific, and yes, it is testable. Due to unresponsive and rude customer service, many students wrote bad reviews about our client, causing a decline in profitability. Again, this does fit into the REST test. And number 4, due to lack of investment, lack of R&D investment, the IT courses are out of date, so students are taking courses from our competitors instead. So what you want to do just in terms of hypothesis generation is just write down as many ideas as you can about why you think this problem might be occurring. And then in the next stage, what you want to do is group them together so you have a structure, and this structure is called the issue tree. So just a quick exercise on how to do that. I just have a random list of words on the slide right here, and what I'm going to do is pause the video right now and group these words together into categories, and on top of those categories you should have a title or conclusion or some sort of header to describe all these words together. So I just want you to group them and then put a header on top. So feel free to pause this video and spend the next 15 minutes doing that. This is a very important exercise and it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, so hopefully you have grouped those words in the previous slide into categories. And here is a sample answer of what I did. So I grouped all these words together as items found around the house. And then I divided them into the different rooms that these items could be found. So bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, living room, and garage. And just as a quick example, so I put bed, dresser, closet it belongs into the bedroom. So you can see that, you know, during hypothesis generation, you might have something like this, where you have a lot of different ideas in all sorts of different places, and then you just want to bring it back and focus on the structure and put everything in structure so you can tackle each one in the experiment and test section in a very logical and sequential way so that you do not miss any critical hypothesis. So what I'm going to do right now is just pause the video and come up with an issue tree for the educational provider. Take as long as you need, and we'll take up a sample answer right after this. So hopefully you have come up with your own issue tree for the educational provider. Here is mine, my sample answer. So what I did was that my first hypothesis is that they're experiencing decline in students due to some external force, or my second hypothesis, a big hypothesis, is that the students were not happy with what they saw in the course, and they did not reply, and they told their friends. And so they're experiencing the declines in the number of students that they have. And under each of these categories, I have more buckets I want to hit. So in external changes, I have competitors, substitutes, and economy. Under customer experience, I have sales, courses, and customer support. So you can see that, you know, in the earlier stage, I just came up with a hypothesis, but I just narrowed it down just to one word, something that can remind you of. So for example, in the first one, I had low-cost competitors, and I just grouped that one all under the competitor section instead of writing everything out. This is because in a case interview, you usually have limited space on paper. And you just want something to jot your memory, and you want to present this structure to your interviewer, and your interviewer don't have time to read entire sentences. So just write something short that can you can remember when you go into the experiment and test section. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. If you are an aspiring management consultant, please sign up for a free consultation to see if any of our one-on-one case interview prep services are right for you. Questions or comments, please leave it below or email us at info@managementconsultingjournal.com. Thanks guys. See you in the next video.